Did you know that 80% of New Zealand is uninhabited? But here's the truth they don't tell you. It's not just about the country's size or its location. There's a deeper reason that no one really talks about. And it might just surprise you. Number 1. The basics of New Zealand. When most people think of New Zealand, they picture beautiful mountains, lush green landscapes, and a country that seems like a dream destination. Famous cricketers like Brendon McCullum, Ross Taylor, and Daniel Vettori have put New Zealand on the map for sports fans in places like India and Pakistan. And the country's breathtaking views and stunning natural beauty made New Zealand even more famous thanks to movies like The Lord of the Rings. But there's more to New Zealand than just its scenic spots and cricket stars. While people know about its beautiful lakes and high-quality organic food, few realize that New Zealand is one of the least populated countries on Earth. Despite all of its perks, amazing weather, world-class scenery, and a high standard of living, about 80% of New Zealand is completely empty. That's right. Almost the entire southern half of the country is uninhabited. Number 2. Why does a place that seems so perfect have so much empty land? First off, let's get one thing straight. New Zealand is far. If you were flying from Mumbai or Karachi, you'd have to cross the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, spending around 18 to 22 hours in the air just to reach it. So yes, it's out there in the middle of the Pacific, far from the hustle and bustle of most countries. But this distance plays a bigger role in its emptiness than you might think. Many people don't realize that New Zealand wasn't always known to the world. About 1,000 years ago, the Maori people discovered the islands after leaving their homes in the Polynesian Islands. They used large canoes to travel across the Pacific Ocean, and after a journey of several days, they landed on what we now call New Zealand. This was around the same time that Genghis Khan was sweeping across Asia. But what's interesting is that there's something people don't usually talk about when it comes to New Zealand's discovery. It was actually discovered earlier than what most history books say. Some Maori records reveal that the first human contact with New Zealand happened 500 years earlier, around 758 AD, by a fisherman named Kupe. Kupe and his team were facing problems on their previous islands, where they relied heavily on fish for food. But every time they tried to fish, giant octopuses would ruin their catch. They had to leave their homes in search of a better place with more resources. After days of sailing, they discovered a land with high mountains and abundant resources, New Zealand. So why didn't the early Maori stay in their original homes? The real reason, as some records show, was that they were facing growing competition and threats from surrounding regions. So, they set out for better opportunities. When they arrived in New Zealand, they found an island rich in seafood and natural resources, with no one else living there. And that's how the Maori became the first settlers of New Zealand. Number 3. The hidden dangers and invasions. Now, you might think that New Zealand was a peaceful paradise after the Maori settled. But the story doesn't end there. It wasn't until much later, in the 17th century, that European explorers started showing up on the shores of New Zealand. One of the first to land was a Dutch explorer named Abel Tasman in 1642. But his attempt to settle was met with violent resistance from the Maori, who forced him to retreat. Fast forward to 1769, when Captain James Cook, a British officer, arrived. And this time, things didn't go smoothly either. Cook's crew had clashes with the Maori, and many Maori were killed in those battles. Cook had to leave, but he made detailed maps that would later allow Europeans to return and colonize. Here's what most people don't know. The British didn't just settle peacefully. They were smart about it. After several failed attempts, they used trade deals and offered the Maori tribes profit-sharing opportunities to get their cooperation. Over time, the British Empire slowly took control of New Zealand. By 1840, New Zealand was officially part of the British Empire after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. This treaty was supposed to protect the rights of the Maori people, but in reality, it led to conflict, as the Maori population soon dwindled. The Maori, who were about 200,000 at the time, started to die off in large numbers due to the spread of European diseases and violent clashes. By the early 20th century, their numbers had decreased significantly, and many Maori movements were crushed in battles that lasted decades. Number 4. The geography factor. So, we've talked about history and invasions, but let's get back to why so much of New Zealand is still empty today. The southern half of New Zealand is not just isolated geographically, but it's hard to develop. The region is filled with mountain ranges, making it almost impossible to build infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and cities would be tough to build in such rough terrain. But the real reason no one lives there is the land itself. The soil in the southern part of New Zealand is poor and infertile, making it nearly impossible to grow crops or sustain any large population. The weather, although mild, also makes farming and settlement there a real challenge. Number 5. Population solutions and immigration. After World War II, New Zealand opened up its immigration policy, which was strict before the war. This change led to a growing population, especially in the north, with cities like Auckland becoming centers of activity. Today, New Zealand has a population of about 5 million, but it's still quite sparsely populated considering the vast land available. In fact, over 27% of the country's population consists of immigrants, particularly from China, the Philippines, and India. This influx has helped boost the economy, especially in industries like agriculture, where New Zealand leads the world in meat exports. Now, what's the conclusion of the whole video? So, there you have it, the untold truth about why 80% of New Zealand remains uninhabited. It's not just about distance or geographical isolation, but a combination of history, geography, and the land itself. Despite this, New Zealand is still a peaceful, prosperous place with a rich culture and diverse population. And the country's agriculture industry is booming, making it one of the top exporters in the world. That's all for today. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe to Time Faith, and stay tuned for more thought-provoking content.